Alberto, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. If it was a keyword by Giovanni, it could have been probably public in this case, because mostly what I'm engaged in, what I'm interested in is the public space, because the public space is one of the realm of architectural design where I think that we can explore more deeply how much architecture can be considered as a relational device. I'm really interested in how architecture, with its successes and failures, can have a role in triggering, in stimulating, or in impeding relational dynamics and the building of a community. I will talk about this keyword in a let's say less in a different way. Okay, I would like to invite you to explore one space, one existing square that I like very much, which is an obsession for me. And then I would like also to invite you to explore one of my projects to highlight some issues, what I call the contradictions of public space, because I think that they could be useful to understand potentialities and also problems, problematic issues in considering gas stations as public spaces. So the question is, can we consider the gas station a public space? Let's try to understand, to answer to this question, highlighting these three contradictions on public space, starting from this square, which is one of the most amazing public spaces I've ever visited. These images are from an Alfred Hitchcock movies from 1965. That was the second version because he did another one before, which is The Man Who Knew Too Much. And it's the beginning of a spy story with James Stewart that is starting in this square, a square which is the perfect place to start a spy story, which was a story like, you can imagine a James Bond movie where you have something happening in one country and then continuing all over the world. Because the plot and the word plot really talks about the idea of interweaving stories, interweaving facts. The plot is really the condition of this square where every day, now it's a little bit more organized than in these pictures that was in the 50s. Now it's a little bit more organized space, but still this square in Morocco, in Marrakesh, Place de Malfina, is an amazing, lively space. It's a square where every day, mostly at dusk, hundreds of people gather. People, as you can see from this picture, they're not necessarily Western tourists. There are many performers doing different things. The most interesting of them, or the most traditional of them, are local people speaking in their own language, which is the Berber, which is not even Arab, but it's a local dialect, that tell stories. They perform, they make jokes, but anyway, they speak in a language which is not made for tourists. So you can imagine that if you're a tourist, you go there and you try to understand something, but it's totally impossible. And then during nighttime, in the evening, there is another amazing thing that happens. Besides these crowds of people listening to these traditional stories, legends, and tales of that country, there is a series of little restaurants that pop up in this square. I don't know how many they are, probably 50, 30. And these restaurants, they're not only temporary, but they're also restaurants that, at least the most traditional one, they serve just one dish. So for example, so if you want to have a complete meal, you should move from one restaurant to the other. It's the most amazing public restaurant I could imagine. There are some kiosks that just sells boiled eggs, or others goat's head soap, or others just sweets and cakes. Of course, there are then some for tourists that they can give you a complete meal. But this is also the interesting thing, that this restaurant is not only something temporary popping out during the night, but is also an extended restaurant inside public space. If you go in this square during the day, it's not anymore as in the Alfred Hitchcock's images. It's a complete void. There is nothing because the municipality has started to put some regulation on this very chaotic place. And if you try and if you search in this place, what are the reasons for the success, why this space is so alive, and you search for any architectonic feature, you just see an empty lot. You see a huge, enormous, gently sloping plain made of asphalt where there is nothing. There is nothing, there is no architectonic feature. Well, I think that this is one of the reasons for the success of this space. I mean, this emptiness, this nothingness of this square. The fact that it's so open and so flat and so undeterminate that it can be used many multiple different. You have to imagine that there is something quite amazing about this square. This square is one of the sites that have been listed in the UNESCO list, but not for its physical content, but for its immaterial, intangible content. It has been listed and protected because of its oral content. So as far as I know, this is the only physical place that has been listed under the UNESCO heritage list because of something which doesn't belong to architecture or to a physical feature. So, and if we try to understand what is, and we study what is the reason of this name, Jema El Fna, there are many different interpretations. This square was originally the places were in front of the palace of the Lord. There were public executions, and at a certain time, it has this name of place of annihilation, which is a name that I like to misread in the idea of place of nothing. Nothingness, it's really the main quality of this space, and I think one of the reasons of its success, and it's also one of the reasons of one of the qualities that a public space should have, the idea of being a terrain vague. I don't know if you know this word, which is a French one. Terrain vague means vague, I think, place, a vague terrain. So a place that has no clear identification. There are full of these places in, for example, in European cities where those squares, those empty spaces in sometimes close to the city walls where weekly markets were happening, where, for example, circuses were installing themselves. So this is one first issue. I think that the question that the public space has to have this undeterminate quality, has to be made of this kind of nothingness, and this is one of the big issues about designing a public space. What shall we design if there is nothing to design? And also, it's one issue that we could keep later on to confront with the space of the gas station. There is a second reason for the success of this square that you can see here in recent, of course, this is Google aerial picture, where you see that it has a very weird shape. Partly is this triangle, then there is another part more closer to the center. If we look at this map, and maybe not at this map, and maybe zooming out, looking at the plan more ancient, this is a plan of 1935, we understand that the square that you can see here as a kind of wedge entering inside the core of the city, this square was a place of transition, was a place that stays in between, that stood in between the center of the city here, where the old souk is, where the old center, the Medina of the city is, so where all the markets, the real markets are, and the south. The south that was an important south. I mean, it's the south of the continent, is Africa, and then Marrakesh, which is, I think, here, was kind of open towards a system of routes that were going down deep into the continent. And so that square was so important because it was also the place where there was a series of routes with all the caravans arriving, bringing goods. And so that place was a place of exchange, and it is still a place of exchange. It has remained like this because it was a place in between. It was a node in a much wider network. And this is another huge problem in designing public spaces, because when you design a public space, you know, the reason for the success of a public space, sometimes they're not in that specific place, but they are elsewhere. So designing a public space means to understand much wider conditions that, as in this case, they go well beyond the physical boundaries of the site. And this is also another issue that I would like you to keep for a later discussion on the fact if we can consider the gas station as public spaces. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, a river. A river has its flows, its water that is coming from very, very far away. Third issue, third contradiction, is the question of the possibility of inhabiting a public space. We know that a big issue about public space is how much you can, let's say, appropriate a space. If we try to go to the roots of the word inhabit, I'm starting here, sorry, from the Italian abitare, we arrive to Latin, which is habitare, which comes from habere, so which means to possess. So somehow the possibility of inhabiting a public space requires the possibility of make at least a portion of it private. To transform a portion of space which belongs to everybody and therefore by consequence to nobody, to a space that belongs to you, maybe also for a temporary moment, like it happens on a beach, on an open beach, which is, as Place de Martina, a totally undetermined space, a flat surface, where every time that we arrive, we are looking for our space. We define our field. We define our field using our blanket or simply choosing the position that we prefer. So the question is, how can we, in this realm which is built for cars, find a place? How can we find our own space? How can we appropriate of space? I want to more go deep into this issue by presenting this project that I chose because I know that Giovanni likes it very much, which is a project for a little square that we did long time ago, let's say, in the southern city of Bari in Italy. This is where the square is. I hope you see my pointer. It's in the part of the town that Bari that has been built during the late 19 and the beginning of the 20th century. This is the medieval part of the town, and is this little square in front of a quite important axis that on the other side has an old theater. And the square at that time was in that condition. Is a square where there is a school, an elementary school, a quite nice building that at that moment was under restoration. There is an ugly fountain. There is a context which has been kind of compromised during time, but still has some qualities. And then the issue, for example, in that case is when we started to design this piazza was, how can we improve this piazza? When you have to design a public space, also if it is of this so small and where you don't have to build anything, you just have to, you know, repave to make a good paving, probably to reorganize the trees, and then to put some benches and some lamps. Every time that we started to design, to place the benches, we kind of stopped. We stopped because we were always thinking about this amazing space, this amazing garden in Paris, which are the Jardin du Luxembourg, which are these gardens where the gardens are full of these beautiful chairs, these steel chairs that allow you to really create your space. You can move the chairs, you can bring them under the shadow of a tree if it's too hot, or on the contrary, under the sun. You can, for example, put them together if you are with some friends. So they really give you the possibility to manage the public space as if it was your own garden, as if you were at your place. While our experience of public spaces usually it's quite different, no? Because if we go in a square during the summertime, probably the benches that are free are those in the middle of the sunlight, and the opposite in the winter. Or, for example, if we go with the group of friends, it's quite unlikely that we can find some benches all together to sit with a group, for example, of 10 people, because the architect, of course, very intelligently has distributed evenly the benches in the space. So we stopped every time starting to place in the benches, asking how we could then give the same freedom that you have in these gardens. That, by the way, they're not a real public space because they are fenced, and they are fenced, and there are some wardens that can fine you if you do something which is not allowed. So the freedom that you have in moving these chairs, of course, is balanced on the other side too by the restriction that you have in the use of the space. So how can you allow this same freedom in a public space if you don't want to fence it? So what we thought is that if maybe you can really move a bench, maybe you can move it in a different way by starting from, you know, the playgrounds that you have for kids. We imagine rotating benches that could be moved in the sun or under the shadow, or they could be turned towards the direction where we were waiting for somebody. That could be placed one in front of the other to gather with some friends. And also we were thinking about the lighting in order to allow different types of uses depending on what we were interested in, either having a clear light to read or being more in the shadow to do something different. So that was a very simple idea that we tried then to put in action in the project. As you can see here, we organized the green spaces, and here we have the plan of the one side of this piazza with these rotating benches with the poles of the light in between them. The geometry of these benches works this way because, of course, it's the way to have them the closer as possible. They are close to the trees because this allows to make this play in between light and shadow. And this is then the square. Realized the bench is a bench which is larger than the usual one, without a back, because also this is a way to let people appropriate of something, because we can use it for sitting or for laying down to sleep, for doing some activities that nowadays in public space sometimes are forbidden by devices that are really against this type of practice. Of course, the trees at the time were really small. What is interesting about this project is that those pictures that you see are the pictures of the opening, where the mayor was there, everybody was happy, everybody was saying, oh, amazing, these benches that you can move and you can put wherever you want to stay with your friends and to enjoy the shadow. So the trees, of course, were quite small. But then after this opening day, the assistant to the mayor was kind of scared that this possibility of the people to act with public space could kind of, you know, instigate or kind of trigger actions of vandalism. So the benches that had been provided with locks were locked in a fixed position. So it's like if this possibility of appropriation and freedom of movement that we were promoting and that we were putting in question in this project was something that was quite problematic for the public power. Still, I have to say that there is this kind of free composition that you can see in this image still allows a kind of a loose multiple ways of relationship because of the size of the benches, because of this kind of non-ordered diverse order of the benches that allows for multiple interpretations. So this is another way of interpretation. So let's keep with us these three concepts. The first one is this idea of nothingness. Can we imagine a public life for gas stations? Understanding which type of void are we facing at? Is it a void that could allow, for example, like in Place Gemelfina, this different and unexpected type of activities? I would like to answer with, in a very negative way, with this word by Zygmunt Bauman from More Than Liquidity. He said, quoting Claude Lévi-Strauss, Claude Lévi-Strauss, the greatest cultural anthropologist of our time, said in Triste Tropique that in all of human history, only two strategies have been used when the problem of the diversity of others has been solved. One has been the anthropoemic strategy and the other the anthropophagic strategy. The two answers so far illustrated need to be added to an increasingly common third. The known places share some characteristics of our first category of public spaces, but absolutely not non-civil. They discourage the idea of settling in, making colonization and settlement virtually impossible. The distinctive element of public but not civilized places, all four categories of places listed above, is the irrelevance of interaction. If we go back to the open spaces of the gas station, we could very easily, place in this category. Let's say that the shopping space, it's an anthropophagic strategy, like the mall, where you enter and when you are kind of eaten by the building, and where you are kind of, all your movement are predetermined, also the way you get out from the autogrill, from these commercial spaces. At the same time, the open spaces of the highway, so despite their generosity, of course, they are just spaces for parking, and there is no possibility, neither in these green areas, to something kind of unexpected to happen. The second issue, I think, is to understand which type of network we are talking about, no? Because we have seen, talking about Place Gemal Fna, that one of the main reasons of its success is the fact that it's just a node of a network. And talking about highways, we could say, well, much wider network than this one. The problem of the highway network is that a network that has no relationship with the real territory. It's a network which is completely closed. It's a network which is completely controlled. It's something that if we could make an analogy with an energetic system, it's like, a pipeline transporting the oil from one point to the other, and the idea of sustainable energy networks and smart grids that, on the contrary, are distributed and they need to have a strict relationship with the territory. As far as I know, the only gas station that has this relationship with the outside rail, with outside of the highway, it's this beautiful autogrill in Varazze in Liguria, which is still like that, but that has not really benefited, or at least it has not been developed as something in between that could have been a relationship with the outside. This is the view, for example, from the Via Aurelia. So from here you can enter the restaurant, which is facing the highway. Of course, it's a building which has this peculiar situation because of the narrowness of the site. And then the third question: which kind of appropriation can we have in these spaces? Can we use the space of the gas station somehow in a way which is not predicted, in a way in which we can choose our position, our condition? Because I think that we also have to think about very practical needs or desires. When you stop an autogrill, probably you don't necessarily want to go inside and have this shopping experience. Probably you just want to have a picnic, having the food that you're bringing with you, or probably just, having your dog to walk a little bit, or at least maybe enjoy just the landscape and have a nice situation. Yeah, probably this is the most striking image I've seen of an appropriation of a highway, but not by chance. It's something that has a kind of resonance with the actual period, with this lockdown. The oil crisis was emptying the highways. After asking these three questions, to which, let's say, the answer is quite negative, if a gas station can be a public space, one could wonder, why should we think about it as a public space? Isn't it a kind of a snobbish let's say, Marxist Italian opposition to the idea of the space of shopping, as it is a gas station, as it is a mall, for example. Why should we talk about this kind of public condition, and also of a public condition as the one that I have shown you about this, with this idea of indetermination, this idea of appropriation, and this idea of relation with the wider context? I think that the key word here is experience. Experience is one of the most important issues, not in, let's say, in the narratives of political oppositions to the capitalist system, but experience is really one of the keywords in the capitalist system nowadays. You know that some economists are talking about the experience economy, saying that in the progression of economic value, if we start from commodities, we have to goods and then to services, the experience is the last stage of the progress of economic value. The experience is the reason why we can be ready to spend more, having a balance of an experience in between what is emotional and what is logic. The idea of experience is something that was invented by Walt Disney, who was the first to name the clients as guests. So to change completely the idea of consummation, of consumerism, and the idea of entering an experience. Of course, we could discuss if this is an experience, as we can discuss if what's the name? Starbucks is a real experience, as Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, was saying. Now that he was quoting the magic experience of espresso invented by the Italians. We can question if these that are mass-produced experience are real experience, or if our experience is the new frontier of museums like the Color Factory in New York. I think that there is also another one in Chicago, where you go there just to take pictures of yourself, to make selfies, because the experience is to produce and to create a narrative on your experience, which of course is a totally fake one. But I think that the importance of experience is also highlighted by the unbelievable success of something like the floating piers by Cristo in the Lake of Iseo, where more than 1 million of people have been visiting this installation on this lake, where mainly the question was not to visit the installation, but was to make an experience and be the visitors themselves, part of the experience. They were part of this experience. I think that we can see at the term of experience now making a jump back in time. Now the keyword could be play, Giovanni, and thinking about, because until now we have seen many experiences that at least we can epitomize as very fake ones, so constructed experience, built experiences. But I mean, the idea of experience was also the basis of many more radical acts, like those of many avant-gardes in the 60s or the 70s that were trying to change what is real, creating events to disturb the social, urban, and architectonic myths and rites, aimed to create a contemporary crisis in the structure of use and fruition of the city and its architecture, altering its responses to those of the expectation of its users, interrupting the system of anticipation of the user who is blocked in stereotyped rules. What I'm trying to say is that if we look back at these guys, here we have Constant, the author of New Babylon, they were trying to completely dismantle our perception of the city, our daily life, our routines about the city. This is a fantastic map that is in the first number of the magazine of a situation where there was this map of the movement of a girl living in Paris in a very bourgeois neighborhood, showing how, if Paris is a huge city, she was kind of mostly doing always the same movement. So all these avant-gardes were trying to work on this idea of breaking the boundaries, breaking the breaking the routines of everyday life to kind of repossess the city, as was doing Ugo La Pietra inhabiting the public spaces. Activating games, where games were intended, as Gregory Bateson was highlighting very well in this conference of 1956. These games were focused on the idea that if we play, we cross the lines of our social frame in which we are placed. Let me just read this with you. The message: this is a game which players exchange more or less clearly, an enunciation of a preliminary agreement that is consciously and freely accepted, highlights a behavioral framework that spans every other framework with which culture topologically defines roles and limits, overlapping them like layers of onion skin. By means and games, discovering where the lines are that divide these layers, learning to cross them, we will become children who are aware of the various types of behavioral categories. What I'm trying to say is that those avant-gardes in the 60s, in the 70s, were trying to establish a playful attitude, were producing playful devices, installations, spaces, in order really to break this frame, the frame in which we are. And this is thinking that breaking this frame, entering another frame is the only way to create a real experience. Losing what we know, entering a new realm, finding new ways of interacting with the others was a very powerful way to have an experience and be liberated somehow of the sameness of the experience that we do every day. Why I'm showing you these two things, the avant-gardes on one side and Disneyland on the other, because I think that both of these strategies, both these approaches, they try to deliver experiences. The experiences that are completely different, but anyway, I think that they are the keyword of our time as a way to, let's say, make more attractive not only goods, but also maybe places and spaces, like our Place de Martena, or as it could be a gas station. Probably more interesting than Disney World are the experiences that Airbnb is now selling. So that I think shows very well how much the experience is the next step of increase of economic value. And I think that more than the experiences that Airbnb is proposing is this one, is the Wondergrottole. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Wondergrottole is a project that a group of, let's say, also friends, architects, and not only did on a little town in the south of Italy, where the idea was they were working on the Matera. Now, it's a long story. Anyway, they proposed to make a residency in this Grottole, which is one of the thousands villages in the south of Italy, and they were looking for money to renew some houses, to host the people, to make these artist residencies. And they found that at a certain point, Airbnb, you can see the logo of Airbnb on this page, and Airbnb not only gave a huge amount of money to buy and refurbish, renew some houses, but also became the media that was kind of promoting this experience. The idea of going in a kind of generic little town in the south of Italy to live for I don't know, for how much, like 2 weeks, 1 week, one month, and be part of a community. And more than 280,000 people applied to Wondergrottole, and I don't know who was able to kind of make the selection to find the final 5 candidates among this huge amount of people. But I think that this thing is really telling us that experience can be really the driver of the future power to attract a new public in different in one place. And I think that this is a crucial question about our gas stations, because our gas stations they suffer from what I will call the fattoria sandwich problem, and they put us in front of the fattoria sandwich dilemma. Probably you don't know what is a fattoria sandwich. The fattoria sandwich was one of the first, let's say, food chain product in the highways in Italy. It's a panino, which is delicious. It's with speck, which is this northern Italy prosciutto, and brie. And it was very, 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 very successful. It was something that really was, at a certain point, was really kind of, the symbol of the autogrill. In the same way, the Big Mac is the symbol of McDonald's. But I think that, of course, the Big Mac, for also nowadays, that the autogrills are changing. They're starting to have more food chains. They're starting to have, they are transforming themselves in malls, so that they have the chains of clothing. You see here Yamamai, Carpisa, and so on. So they are really becoming bigger and transforming in another type of generic shopping place. Then the question is, every time that we travel, and I have also small kids, and they love to go to McDonald's, but also when we are abroad, we always this dilemma: shall we go to have a Big Mac that we know very well, we know what we will find, or shall we risk something new? I think that this is the question about working on the public space on autogrills. And so deciding if we want to have a space which is completely indifferent to the territory and distributed as these food chains, all the same in the country, or if it should have some kind of relationship with the context, and maybe going back to the old good times where when the gas station were offering different types of food in relationship to the different types of cooking traditions they were encountering. So you could have the different types of wine, different types of meat, and whatever. I think that in this dilemma stands our design activity, and I think it's really one issue if an autogrill is a public space or not. Are you still there?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Alberto.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was very interesting, very provocative, very stimulating, going up and down from pop culture, visual culture, advertising, food, that is always a great key to understand Italian phenomena, and not just Italian. So a lot of ideas and a lot of beautiful images. That is important, no? How images can nourish and give us beautiful ideas, no? From Marrakesh to the Motogrill of the 60s, from the 60s. And also it's important, was very exciting for me to remember or to discover a lot of mythologies, no? Daily mythologies, the myths that nourish the use of the infrastructures, the use of the facilities along the infrastructures, the use of the cars, etc. No? There are mythologies that are not just big intellectual constructions, but are everyday behaviors, everyday choices in terms of shopping, in terms of buying, in terms of consumerism, of choosing the right sandwich, naming with the right name the sandwich. No, fattoria means farm, so is a memory of a rural culture, of a rural element, typically rural element in the most in the place that at the time was the most advanced, the most technological, the most projected into a non-rural environment. No? So that was very typical of many elements of this dialogue between what the things that you called the network. You said highways are not have little contact with the real territory, but also highways are the real territory under many aspects. So are another territory that for many people, like me, for example, are more real than the territory that is that they pass through. So anyway, so thank you a lot, and I ask everybody. Also, I'd like that students make some comments and ask questions to Alberto. Of course, colleagues. So please.
I want to really thank Alberto for many reasons. First of all, because he doesn't know, but I started my doctoral thesis by looking Piazza Risorgimento project, because I was in charge to do a research about public spaces, and when I saw it, I thought, okay, I don't know how to call the thesis, but I want to look something like this. So I started with that, and also because he did a lecture about public space that I would have done in the same way. So he spared me this this lecture. No, I wanted to deepen one thing that is about the idea, the possibility of doing of making the gas station public spaces. That is very interesting. It's very interesting that you started by talking about Rennbag, because when the discussion about Rennbag started in the early 90s by Sola Morales and others, it was triggered by a specific study on some specific places that were the parking lots on on the backside of the mall. And then there is this book that is beautiful, that is Skateboarding, Space and the City, that tells this history. And it was very interesting because the urban scholars noted that the real public space, while there was a sort of abandonment of the traditional public spaces, the real public was happening in parking lots. And so they asked why, because it was something in a certain way disruptive. And the idea was that they were not prescriptive spaces, so they could accept many different things, and it was not just for the redundancy of space, but because of the openness also in terms of architecture. For instance, there is the last essay by Richard Sennett, that is Dwelling Ethics for the City, that tells an history that is very similar. There is a piazza in India that was very similar to the one in Marrakesh and how is not being prescriptive could really open the city from a certain point of view. And you always do this comparison between that piazza and l'Esplanade de la Défense in Paris, and telling, okay, they are very open, they are very redundant in terms of space. What is the difference in terms of architecture? And so I thought that is very interesting, that the parking lots and the gas station, some way, could have the perfect, could be the perfect stage to interpret this kind of non-prescriptive space. So it could be. It could be really interesting also to force, in terms of design, to force this aspect as an added value, so as a trigger point to create sort of publicness. It would be, I don't know how, but it reminded me that okay, we are working on something that is precisely the prototype of non-prescriptive space, and so that could make different kind of publicness emerge. And maybe working on the connection. Now, of course, they are not working like that, because they are also disconnected by all the rest of the the territory, but also by from the normal flow of people passing through the highway. So I don't know how, but this is like a provocation for the students that it could be a good stage to exploit some way.
Yeah, yeah. I think I totally agree with you, of course, and I would the last book by Sennett it's very enlightening from this point of view. But I remember also in The Conscience of the Eye, a previous book, when he was talking about the playgrounds, the hard surfaces in New York City, and he was saying, well, you know, a space becomes narrative in the moment in which it's being used in the way it wasn't meant to be. So it's really this idea of a space not being prescriptive and being the possibility of using it in different ways from which it was used that really creates depth, creates a public dimension of space. And I also want to mention that this term terrain vague emerged in an interview to Constant that did my friend Francesco Careri some years ago, and he asked Constant, he asked, where is now today for you New Babylon? And he answered, for me New Babylon is everywhere there is a terrain vague, like for example this one in front of my house, where the gypsies are staying with their caravans, and that will become another thing another day. So it's really this question of having the possibility of changing using the spaces in ways that are not prescribed. The question here, I think, is about the community. We don't have any community in the gas station. Where is the community? Unless we don't have some gas station which are in some kind of dense context in which you can kind of establish a relationship with an outer realm, with another territory. And let's say the dwellers of the spaces are dwellers that they stay there for just a few minutes. But then the question, I think, that if we can't have maybe a community, if we maybe can't expect that we have, you know, kids appropriating the space skateboarding because they should arrive by car, but probably yes, they could do it. I think that still there is a possibility that you could have in those huge parking lots, I don't know, some kind of temporary events happening, like more, you know, archigram where depicting, or I don't know, a weekly market or something that, you know, that in that specific gas station once a week or in that week of the month there is the sagra of something. You know what is a sagra? It's those food festivals dedicated to just one type of food, a sagra del porcino or something like that. So I think that still there are some ways, despite we don't have a community living there, so some possibilities that you have in real urban spaces are not there.
Thank you. By the way, yesterday I called Francesco to intervene, but he was ashamed of his English. So I can intervene in Spanish, I can intervene in French, but not in English.
Yeah, he has really a terrible English. I know.
Okay, it's not an excuse. Okay.
No, that's true.
Tutors, students, any question? One point that I was thinking about while your presentation, especially when, for example, you cited the Disney strategy that the client is a guest. You say for Disney invented the client as a guest. For the gas station, I think should be interesting for us to ask ourselves if who is the client, which role, which suit has the client. Now, is the client is a guest, but also, for example, a client is a citizen, because our highways more or less are in some way a public facility. Also, if the owner can be private now, some of them, but mostly is a facility designed and realized by for intention of the government, of the state, for a development of the country. So is a public facility in its nature, I think. And this is another point. The client also in the highway is a visitor. No, you always are a visitor, because as you said, you stay just for a few minutes. So you are just passing by always. You can stay maybe for an hour in the church of by Michelucci, in the Autostrada del Sole. You can stay for an hour in a restaurant, but you are always a visitor. Also, in a way, you can be an intruder, no? Because you can, in a way, interfere with the normal activities. There is an overlapping of a basic overlapping of different activities, because one is make fuel, another one is the restaurant, can be the kid that has to run for 5 minutes because entering the car again. There is the dog that wants to piss around, etc. So there is the problem of and there is the main flow of the cars through the highway, entering and getting in and out from the highway. That is a very complicated and to be treated with a lot of care, no? The entering and the getting out of the highway of the cars. So where in your opinion, how we should consider the client, the people using the gas station? Because the positioning the people, we change the concept of the project. We change the nature of the project, probably.
Is it a question to me or to the students?
To you.
I think that this is a big issue on public space, also in the cities. No, the question always of what is the public of a public space. You know, what is the audience? You know, and the fact that the audience, if you use this term that I don't like, well, what is the public of a public space? It's an issue also in the public squares, because you have different times of the day, you have different users. You can have kids, maybe small kids in the morning, they don't go to school. Then you have the elderly also that can use the square during, and then you have the aperitivo time, and then you have the night. So it's really an issue which is also problematic for spaces that are being used for markets, for example. No, you have a market during the day, and then during the night the market is a kind of a ghost architecture. So it is a super interesting topic, which is probably also pushed to an extreme in a gas station, because let's say the audience, it's an audience which is quite generic, and it's always changing. It stays for a very little time. I think that in front of this question, we have two possibilities. One is that we go towards something which is, you know, so specifically directed toward an audience. Like, for example, I make the nicest skate park of the region, so I will have all the skaters stopping by, and that will be the place for that community. The second option is that, if thinking about, and this was one of the challenges of, let's say, also another type of playful architecture, to imagine architectures that could kind of adapt and transform during time, kind of host different type of activities for different publics and different audiences. If I have to tell, I would say that probably the public that this is probably also a generational issue, because I've been living, of course, now I'm with my kids, they are like 12 and 10, and now have different needs from when I was a kid and was maybe using the highways. Now I see that, for example, many spaces are lacking for families, because kids and dogs are the biggest issue. And when you enter, for example, this kind of eating space, these anthropophagic spaces like the autogrill, it's a nightmare with kids, because they're just a machine for selling you something. So you want absolutely to stay out of those spaces, which is, of course, something that they want to push you to buy. So I think that those who probably need more, having a way, could more inhabit those places are families. I don't see so much, I don't know, maybe businessmen stopping and, having a kind of deviation from the daily habits, or maybe, I don't know, Giovanni going back and forth from Padova and Torino, then deciding to have little stroll in a in a gas station. So families probably are let's say the first target, I think, of trying to produce some kind of experiences. But then, of course, yes, you could also invent something which is on the other side very programmatically defined. There was a message by Camilla Vespa about flexibility of public spaces and experience economy in particular. Wow. It's not easy because they are two quite different arguments. Experience economy, there is this book by those two guys, now I forgot the name, those two economists that really wrote a book about experience economy. About flexibility in public spaces, well, what could I say? I could say my book, Game Zone, but Giovanni Corbellini says John Meda. I probably have, we should ask Giovanni, who is more...
Probably there is one study case which I think is very interesting.
Gilmore,
that is the one of the Tempelhof former airport in Berlin. You know that there was a big competition about designing a new park in Tempelhof, but the inhabitants rejected the idea of designing that kind of space because they wanted to remain flexible. So that is a big question. If it is, well, what is the design solution that accepts flexibilities and open solutions? Because I'm not sure that a no design option is the right one. I think it is important to keep the role of designers as those who can leave a flexible space as a result of their actions, and but that is interesting. I think that there is quite a lot of to Camilla Vespa. There is quite a lot of information about Tempelhof in Berlin, and that could be an interesting study case.
There is a nice book that has been wrote by one of the members of Orizzontale, who is an Italian collective. They work very much in public space, doing temporary installation, and it was called Urbanità Spontanea. I just sent the link. And it talks very much also about the work done, for example, by groups like those that have been working in Tempelhof and in the Palazzo della Republik, the Raumlabor, Berlin. It's all about actions more than an architecture of action. And for example, in this book, one of the main references was Cedric Price, that Giovanni was of course referencing before.
May I add something?
Sure, please.
So there are too many things to talk about because the beautiful lecture of Alberto was very dense. So, but I would point out just a few things randomly. So the first is that in that book of Marcello Minale, I write above the chat. I write about in the chat before. There was some news about gas station that could be interesting. The first one is that Shell Oil is the biggest player as an international firm around the world. So Shell is bigger than McDonald's. It has more retailing points than McDonald's. So it is more internationally widespread. And one of the interesting things is that all these international franchise are always the same everywhere. And this is something of reassuring. And when we travel around the world, we find things that we know. So it is one of the starting points is this one. The other one is that gas stations don't make money selling gas, because gas is the cheapest commodity they sell. They make money selling services and other commodities, which are very expensive in gas stations. Why they are very expensive? Because in a way, when people goes through this linear plants, which are gas station. You know, you enter in a place, you go outside, passing through the shop. You are in a way in a very weak situation, because you had an armor, which is the thin box of the car, and then you are like a naked turtle without your metal armor, and you are very, very weak in a way. So you buy things because you are in a special situation. Another issue is that everybody goes through these places, because everybody has a car and goes through gas stations. So gas stations are a sort of commercial hub when you increasingly find everything you need, because people stop there, and the commerce can exploit the situation. You are weak and you stop there. So, for instance, now that Amazon has these places in which you can collect things they send you, many places of them are gas stations, because you pass through there somewhere in the day or in the week. So there are many things that are interesting. Another thing that came to my mind is that, yes, of course, freeways are the same probably everywhere, because it is a sort of system. It is an environment which needs to be always the same, because there are issues of security, of communications, of very fast communications, so it has to be effective. But in some places it works in a different way. For instance, my friend Pippo Ciorra made a lot of research about the Adriatic situation. You know, the Adriatic region is a sort of big metropolis in which the main street is the highway, and people meet there in the gas station of the freeway, especially in the night when other places are closed. So it is a sort of urban space used like a piazza. So people meet there, and it is something similar in LA, in Los Angeles, which is a very widespread and low density place. And Los Angeles is a sort of collection of villages, and the true public space is the freeway, and also the places on the freeways has this sort of situation. Another thing is about tradition. You know, outlets are connected with freeway junctions, and outlets in Italy are historicist. So there are the Palladian one in Veneto, the Tuscan one in Tuscany, and so on. So there is this fattoria dilemma that produce spaces also outside the freeway. So I have not a question, but I mean, you put my mind in movement, and there are many issues that can be addressed, because it was a wonderful lecture.
I think that the example of, for example, of the Autostrada Adriatica is interesting, because it really tells us that also this closed system can react and interact with the context, no? Because along the Adriatica, it's really a linear city. So it's a conurbation. It's a urban development that really is along this highway, and so really also the value of these spaces can change very much depending on what is around, what is the context, despite their autonomy towards the context.
Yes, but I think that this sort of generic features of this environment is something that can accelerate this connection with the context, with real context, because it is this sort of generic, or maybe you told about terrain vague, because it is absence of characterization, of local characterization can react better with this situations, which is weird for architects, because we are looking for specificity always.
But I think that the crucial point is to open the service areas to the surroundings, because up to now it is possible to enter from outside, from the back of each area, but only for those who are working. Or if you are walking inside, it is possible. For instance, in the two service areas of Villoresi, on the highway from Milano to the lakes, it is possible to enter, and you are, by the way, very close to the cycle path of the Villoresi canal. So it is possible to enter by foot, have a drink or have a meal, and then continue. But it is not really something that is organized. These spaces are really ugly. They are the back of the highway, places where they keep all the waste so that they can collect it from outside there. And so that is a crucial point, to make them accessible, to make them more osmotic, more transparent, and probably providing uses of the territories around for hikers or for skaters, like you said before. So provide the different uses from those of the highway could be a good idea, or a three-star restaurant. I don't know any fan. I'm not a fan of a fancy restaurant, but to locate a very beautiful restaurant in the territory inside the highway could be a possible solution, rather than keeping them as places like they are now.
If I can add something. Scusa, Alessandro, vai.
Vai.
No, I wanted to answer also to this question by Juan Sebastian Diaz Reveron, who asked, how do you see this experience of economy in the near future involving new experiences in relation with design in these motorway stops? I think that this is, I mean, I'm now working in the school where I'm managing the master's program on a master on experience design. And the coordinator of this master is a guy who is somebody who designs experiences for, let's say, very high, very top level clients, people that don't want to go in to visit castles or palaces that have a website, just to tell you how much the idea of experience is really linked to the fact that you're doing something that nobody else is doing. Okay, so it's really this question of uniqueness that Giovanni was it's also in contrast with this idea of genericity, because uniqueness now, it seems something that it's a great value in what you can offer. And I think that if you look at food, the food is very interesting, because food is really the sector where this contradiction is more evident. They are producing new formats of food delivery experiences, and then you have mock, and then you have they're inventing continuously new experiences where they desperately seeking to give you the idea that this is authentic, that this is genuine, that this is, it looks like you are in the, I don't know, in the butcher that was in the old village. And this is totally fake, because of course it's part of a chain. So I think that really now the question is how can you make something unique, because that can make the difference in the sameness of those spaces from an economical point of view. Just because I'm Italian and I'm very proud of my country, I think that our territory really offers, as Andrea was saying, so many opportunities. Driving in a highway in Italy is always an experience where every 10 kilometers you have a different landscape, you have different situations. And I think that it's really this relationship with the landscape that could make of every gas station, if it's compatible to the, let's say, to the business model of these places, to have their own uniqueness from many points of view.
About this point, we decide to work on gas station because before we decide to work on the inland part of Italy, on the Apennines, in the part where there are phenomena of abandon, of economical recession, of weakness, and those places have this character. Arquata, sorry Giovanni, is not a brilliant place. And Serravalle, and Ronco, and Vocemola, etc. All the villages and small towns there are all quite depressed, with one very important exception, that there is the outlet of Serravalle that is huge, that create very long lines of car for the entering in Serravalle every weekend. So that is a huge attraction, nearly connected, integrated with the highway system that works exactly as the highway, because people arrive there from 100 kilometers around, from Genova, Milano, part of Piedmont, etc. So what is the thing? We open the highway to the surrounding. How nice is the landscape? There is not nice, but anyway, you like that landscape. But to who? No, who is the destination? Because some bikers, this is for me a very crucial point, because I think there is a difference between we would like to do, we would like the reality is, and what reality is. The reality is that people make that highway to go to the Riviera from the Pianura Padana. That is the main goal of the highway for the weekend. No? And the other days is for trucks going up and down from the port of Genoa, mostly. So, and also to the highway to the France and Spain. So is this overlapping of different scales, of different users, of different scale, for example. No? How many cars pass there in a Sunday afternoon? Thousand. No? How many people can enter the gas station from the nearby town? Maybe 10. So how to manage these different scales in terms of space, in terms of infrastructures, but also in terms of possibility of use, of economic development of those areas.
Well, let me say that, for example, the first banal answer to me is that you're just offering things to a huge public who is passing through the highway. I mean, if I could have a nice restaurant facing the landscape instead of being inside a totally artificial environment, I would prefer to stop there 100 times. Maybe I'm just you know, a small percentage of the population, but so I don't know. I think that, I mean, the public is there. The public is the people passing the highway, and then one could bring from the territory some values that could be offered to this public instead of probably making the contrary. I don't know. Another interesting thing, I don't know, probably you have read about it. I mean, that the Autogrill in Cantagallo at the beginning had many services. There was the bank, the post office, I don't know, whatever. And I was just wondering, always talking about public and audience, again, Giovanni making back and forth from Padova to Torino. But what if you could find some things that you usually do in your town that maybe you could do while, you know, moving? Like, I don't want to say like to pay something at the post office, but like, you know, making real shopping for food. You're coming back home and you have to stop and you could have a food market. So I think also that in this idea of always more, you know, extended relationship with the territory, we could also imagine those places as part of everyday life, something that usually are in town, and that could be instead distributed along a path. So I can stop, and while I'm stopping to pee or to have a coffee, I can also buy something for dinner at home tonight, and not just those very expensive prosciutto or salami that you can find in the Autogrill. Why not? A part of the domestic urban realm just distributed along this station.
Yes.
It's also probably a matter of changing the idea of traveling time that we have, because if we could think that to go from Milano to Genova, it doesn't take 2 hours. I know that we had already this discussion with Alessandro. he believes that it is better to move like in a tunnel and leave Milano and get to Genova, where you have a better experience.
No, that's
I don't have to say this to you, but in any case, I do believe that if there are opportunities to enjoy the time that you are spending while traveling, it is much better, especially if you consider when you are traveling with a family. I remember once I went up to the Netherlands by car, and I remember I stopped in one service area, and there were like maybe 20 trucks parked in the area. And so I thought, well, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I thought, why do all these trucks stop here? And then there was a small path going through the forest, and you needed to cross the guardrail to reach that path. So I went through with the family, and there was a beautiful lake with all the lorry drivers having a swim and eating their sandwiches just beside one of the most awful highways in the area of the Rhine between Switzerland and Germany. So sometimes I think that opportunities could be exploited. I know an area of in France where they transformed the lakes that are usually surroundings as quarries. The highway have been transformed into natural resources. So relationships with the landscape are really crucial.
Yes, Andrea, but it's very interesting also what Alberto was saying about daily activities and daily life, because some way, I mean, mobility replaced the contiguity, no? But at the same time, the infrastructure, the territorial infrastructure remained heterotopic. Even though they are daily paths, but also the infrastructure, the facilities, not only the infrastructure, it's something that is external to normal life. When you go there in the gas station, you don't find the normal products you can find in. It's something that belongs to another kind of experience. But if you provide the facility for keeping this sort of virtual contiguity in the same, let's say, realm of daily life, it could be also a very interesting thing to exploit.
But for example, one of the aspects is that in the highway there is a different economy. Gas is more expensive, food is more expensive. You can make shopping at the gas station, but you spend maybe 30% or 50% more than in the Carrefour or Esselunga in your quarter. The gas is very, very more expensive than in the gas station out of the highway. So it's a specific economy that is affordable for some people, but not for everyone. So it's a specific condition.
We should have a closer economic study on how much this model could be maybe replaced by another model where you widen up your possible audience and maybe having lower prices, and if it could work. I think that as usual, I mean, maybe the role of the architects is also just to imagine this, and then probably somebody could kind of try to figure out how it could be economically viable.
No, probably something will change with electric cars, because the charging batteries of electric car will take half an hour. So if you are going to have long trips, you every 300 or 400 kilometers, you have to stop for a longer time. So maybe this is something that can play a role in the design of these new places, no? Because right now, if you have a diesel car, you never go to make gas in the freeway because it is expensive, as Alessandro told us before. No? So, I mean, if you have 1,000 kilometers of autonomy, of the possibility to go for a longer longer trip, you just stop for a pee or for a sandwich, no more. So I think that this and probably electric cars will be very widespread in the near future, because so it is no affordable to have polluting cars in cities, especially in Pianura Padana, where we have an air which is a mess. So probably this is I think that you have to take in account to take care of in order to design these places, because I mean there will be a sort of time in which gas cars and electric cars will stay together. So it is also interesting to mix up different users and try to figure out how you can address their needs.
Yeah.
Yes, and also I want to stress another time the Japanese model, the Miki no Eki model, that is one that keeps everything together. So just to answer to Alessandro about the different economic model, that is not something that we have to take for granted, but there are some economic models that keeps together, for instance, Andrea's idea of connection with the territory and enhancement of the territory with something more linked to the daily life, because really Japanese people, when they are moving, they use those places as a normal malls, and they are also gas station, they are a touristic attraction, they are amusement park, and they are also working within they are government promoted, but they are privately funded, and they work with this kind of intersection that is very interesting. Just to say that there are other models that could be applied also. They are feasible because they are already tested.
Okay. So there are no other questions. Anyone wants to intervene, to say anything, to ask anything to our lecturers?
From the students, I think that some of the issues are very, very practical for the works that they are developing. So maybe they would ask comment about their design strategies to our lecturers.
Also, Luca, Gino, Francesca.
Alessandro, you are there.
Alessandro. No. Okay.
Don't watch the silly video that I posted. That is for Professor Rocca and his relationships to Liguria.
Okay,
watch it in the afternoon. But it is funny for the relationship between I hate the back territories or things like that.
Okay, so thank you very much to Giovanni Corbellini, Alberto Iacovoni, two beautiful lectures, very dense, very brilliant, with a lot of suggestions for us. You were very kind to give us an entire morning of your time, and I hope to see you soon again for the next occasion, and thanks a lot for coming here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank
It was
you.
really
Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Okay, and we are going to see tomorrow the students for the revision.
Exactly. We start tomorrow 9:30 for a review. Okay.
Bye, guys. See you tomorrow.
Okay.